You're watching Gearz, brought to you by O'Reilly Auto Parts. Better parts, better prices every day.
You know, they say that there is a story behind every project, and that is true. But not all projects are created equal, and neither are the stories behind them. For example, the story in the project that we're going to show you today started out a long time ago when a little 5-year-old kid saw a 1941 Dodge Power Wagon sitting at the local airport. Now, it wasn't much to look at. Most people thought it was pretty rough. But to the kid, it was the coolest looking thing he'd ever seen. And he vowed that one day he was going to own a truck like that. Well, that kid was me. And the story doesn't end there. It picks up again 30 years later when I pulled that exact same Power Wagon out of a field just a few miles down the road from that airport. Now, obviously, being a World War II survivor, this thing was pretty rough at this point. But I thought it was worth saving. And that old 1941 Power Wagon became the basis of the Sergeant Rock project. Of course, the first step in any project is to lay it out and decide what direction the build will take. And even though I managed to get the old engine running, that was never the plan for the truck. That was just fun. No, my plan was to redesign the truck from the ground up to be a massive tribute to the military. And we were fortunate to be able to tie it in with the restoration of the legendary Memphis Belle B-17. So I knew it had to be big, and it had to have guns on it. So the first step was to determine the height. The tires were mocked in place to get the proper width, and then the engineering and fabrication began. A pair of 2.5-ton Rockwell military axles were stuffed with forged shafts and air lockers to provide the strength and traction required to handle 54-inch tall tires. A 4-wheel disc brake conversion provides the stopping power, and when you add 18-inch wide beadlock wheels and 20-inch wide tires, the whole axle assembly measures 8.5 feet wide. Perfect! The stock frame was retained, but it was boxed, widened, strengthened, and stretched in 100 different ways to give us the strength and support that this truck was going to need. This was required not only to fit the body, but also the massive suspension, the winch, and the other stuff that was going to be part of this buildup. Now, as far as suspension, I originally planned to use the stock military leaf springs to keep an old school kind of vibe. But with over 850 horsepower going in, leaf springs just weren't going to get it. So we cut it all off and got rid of it. And to go in its place, I designed a custom radius arm suspension with Allen Pizzo from Predator Racing. Now, what makes this suspension so unique is that we use the same nitrogen shocks and sway bars that Allen builds for his Predator monster trucks. Now, this will give us the strength and suspension travel we need, plus the ability to absorb hard impacts and abuse and still have the right old school look. The body was where things got really interesting because there was no real bed, just slabs of sheet metal hacked together. And parts of an International cab had been joined to the Dodge cab way back in World War II, so it was a mess. The solution was to take everything I had imagined as a kid and design a special bed to fit the direction of the build. Then we hooked up with the boys at Alton Truck Manufacturing and we put it together. Now, it's basically a custom step side with all kinds of unique features like huge fenders to fit the tires, pockets for the exhaust stacks, floor supports for machine guns, and a special tailgate that utilizes B-52 door latches. Custom running boards were also fabricated to tie the front and rear fenders together and give you something to stand on. And on the cowl, the blend between the Dodge and International body lines was smoothed out so everything looks original. Of course, there were some other body lines added too, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. The color is a special mix that we created with PPG called Sergeant Rock Metallic, And even though the pearls and metallics explode in the light, you never lose the slight hint of green that's there to remind you that this is a military vehicle. And that brings us to the drivetrain. Now, when I was designing this truck, I looked at every kind of engine: diesel, Hemi, V12, you name it. But the best fit for this tight little engine compartment was a big Mopar wedge. But not just any wedge. Check it out. We went to Indy Cylinder Heads, and they put together one of their 605 cubic inch max wedges that turned the dyno at over 850 horsepower and 840 foot-pounds of torque. Yeah. And putting that kind of engine in a 70-year-old truck required the fabrication of some very special motor mounts and even more frame modifications. To make sure that the engine would start and run and be ready to go whenever we are, we put on a Holley Dominator fuel injection system and tuned it for maximum performance. We backed up that power with a Bowler-built 727 automatic transmission and an Atlas II transfer case to help try to channel all of that power down to those big Rockwell axles. Hey, welcome back to Gearz and the payoff of Sergeant Rock, a truck that I started building over 10 years ago and have been slowly putting it together along with a lot of other really crazy stuff. Now, so far we've shown you all the major components that went into building this truck. Now we're going to talk about the details, because it's those details that take all the extra time, but they're also the thing that raise the bar on a project and make it something truly unique. Let's check it out. Once all the heavy fabrication and design work was done, it all needed to be disassembled yet again for painting and detailing. So, the frame was smoothed and blended to look like a one-piece stamping, and plenty of button-head screws were used to continue the rivet look all the way down the frame. With the axle housings, radius arms, and other components cleaned up and powder-coated, it was time to start putting it all together for the last time. The Power Boost brake system was hidden under the floor, and the vulnerable brake lines were encased in protective steel tubing and mounted on the radius arms for a super clean look. The rear bumper was hand-built with the bed, but the front bumper is an aftermarket Toyota bumper, which obviously required not only heavy modification to the frame rails, but also the fabrication of custom mounting brackets. However, once it was all painted and assembled, it came out looking like a factory Dodge bumper with just enough room for a 15,000-pound winch. Of course, the turn signals and driving lights were not something that you necessarily needed in World War II, but pretty important when fighting today's rush hour traffic. The interior was a whole different challenge because there basically wasn't any. So, keeping the World War II bomber theme in mind, I laid out the bomber gauges like you'd find them in a B-17 bomber, and then fabricated a floor, console, door panels, and a ton of other special features to keep the right military look. And just in case you're wondering, everything is fully functional, from turn signals to cowl vent to that roll-out windshield. Now, at this point, you are probably realizing that I was rapidly running out of room to put stuff. Because even though this truck looks big, a 1941 half-ton truck is pretty small, which meant that the bed was the only place to put the fuel tank and the batteries. So, we mounted a custom stainless steel tank in the center and flanked it with twin batteries, so we'll always have enough power to run the truck and the guns. Now, a lot of people have asked about the machine guns. And originally, I had real 50 cals from the Memphis Belle, but the government came and took those when they moved the airplane. So, now I've got replicas that fire propane and oxygen, and they'll definitely wake up a sleepy crew. Fire in the hole. You know, one of the first things that people notice and comment about when they see the Sergeant Rock truck is all of the special features that are built into it. And there is no way for us to show them all to you in just one show. But we can show you the things that people ask about the most. So that's what we're going to do, starting with the exhaust system. As I said before, I designed the bed to fit 5-inch exhaust stacks, but the rest of the exhaust system existed only in my head. Fortunately, the guys at Stainless Works were able to translate that into some headers that wind around the shock mounts, down the inner fender, to a pipe tucked under the running boards, then into a custom muffler in the stacks. And the only thing that's better than the way it looks is the way it sounds. The artwork is another thing that grabs a lot of attention. The angry ram on the firewall is the creation of Cliff Daigle, and so are the Memphis Belle pinup girls on the cowl. The tailgate is the work of Mickey Harris, and that brings home the fact that this truck is not only a tribute to the World War II generation, but to all the men and women who have served in our military since the foundation of the nation. Just like the rest of the truck, the more you look at the tailgate, the more interesting things you're going to see. And that brings up another question. With all the paint and detail work here, a lot of people think this is just a show vehicle, designed to look good and make a statement. Now, that's not the case. It's also designed to run. So if that's the case, what's it like to drive it? Well, hop in. The hydraulic steering in front makes the truck very easy to steer, even with the big tires. Steering the rear axle is as simple as flipping the toggle switch left to right. And the self-centering function keeps the rear axle straight when you need it to be. The rear steer also allows you to make extremely tight turns if you steer in the opposite direction of the front, or crab sideways if you steer in the same direction, making it very nimble for a big rig. However, if you get mixed up, yeah, that's a large pepperoni. And don't pay attention to what you're doing. You want double pepperoni, don't you? Yeah, double pepperoni. I'll tell you what, you can pretty much figure that you're going to damage something. Hey, do you see anything over there? No, not you. Riding in Sergeant Rock is surprisingly comfortable, with the position of the seat, the shifter, the steering wheel, and the pedals exactly where they should be. However, just because it's comfortable and well laid out doesn't mean it's legal or easy to drive. With massive width, chest-high bumpers, and huge blind spots, you better be paying attention or you're gonna damage something. Did you feel that? Oh! But all that torque and horsepower will also find any weak spots too. And we quickly found one when I romped hard on the throttle and grenaded the rear CV joint. That's why it's important to have a break-in and test period for any major buildup. It allows you to find and correct things before they become a serious problem and leave you stranded. Got something broke. So I quickly pulled out the drive shaft, and we'll send that off to Carolina Driveline so they can build us a stronger one. Meaning that for now, that muddy, gnarly creek is just gonna have to wait. Hey, welcome back to Gearz. If you're just getting here, man, you have missed a lot, because we've been flexing the muscles on Sergeant Rock and walking very quickly through the thousands of hours it took to build this thing. Now, one thing we haven't covered is the reaction we get when we take this thing out. Take a look. On the street, and especially at a gas station, there's probably an easier way to do this, but I haven't figured it out yet. The truck definitely causes a commotion as people try to figure out exactly what it is. Oh, yeah. Really, what do you really like about it?
The detail.
Anything in particular?
That shovel. I mean, there's little touches like that that really make it.
I don't know, Mark. Do you feel like a burger? Why don't we stop in to get a burger? To venture into a fast food drive-thru was worth it just to see the reaction and the panic in people's eyes.
Stop, stop, you're too big, stop, you're gonna wreck it, stop. Stop, you're too big, stop.
And if you try to park it somewhere, be prepared to draw a crowd or spark a riot, depending on how tight the parking spaces are.
Oh, no, I can fit. No, really, I can fit. No, trust me. Oh, you're gonna move? Yeah, hey, you don't have to move. I can fit, really, I can fit. Trust me, I do this all the time.
But the best reaction was when we took it to the SEMA show in Las Vegas, where it was invited to take its place among the top custom vehicles in the world and be seen by millions of gearheads. But before it could be seen, we had to get it there. And shipping Sergeant Rock is its own kind of adventure. Check it out.
Now, Quick Tip. Brought to you by E3 Spark Plugs. Born to burn.
Now, I know there's a lot of you out there that would like to build something using this big a tire, and that's really cool. But if you do, you need to know a couple of things. Number one, don't ever let one fall over, because you'll give yourself a hernia trying to pick one of these things up. Number two, if you're ever going to ship the vehicle in an enclosed trailer, you're going to have to swap the tires to something like that. Yeah, not quite as impressive, but still pretty cool. If you'd like to learn more tips to make your life easier in the shop, check out the tips page on the website. Once we got it to Vegas, the truck definitely made an entrance when it rolled in, because squeezing that big, wide beast down a narrow 9-foot aisle definitely caused some tense moments for some car owners. And seeing the overwhelming response to the truck was a fitting end to a great project. Now, if you watch Gearz very much, you know that we usually do a custom guitar to go with any of the big projects. And Sergeant Rock is a natural for that. For this one, we hooked up with the Tennessee Electric Guitar Company in Nashville because they specialize in high-end, hand-built guitars for the serious player. And we came up with a Sergeant Rock guitar that's loaded with some of the best parts out there. The neck is hard rock maple with an ebony fingerboard. The body and headstock are unique to Tennessee Electric. The paint, the pin-up girl, the brushed aluminum, the rivets, all match the details on the truck. And the pickups are 3 Seymour Duncan mini humbuckers that'll give you virtually any sound you can imagine, from humbucker sustain to single coil bite. Tennessee Electric Company will be doing a limited run of these Sergeant Rock guitars, so if you want one, you can have one. Just not number one. That's mine. Now, one last thing. I know there's a lot of people out there that get discouraged when a project takes longer than they think it should. But you gotta remember, most ground-up builds, on average, are gonna take 2 to 5 years, even if you're a pro, because a lot of times we're building more than one vehicle at the same time. So don't be so hard on yourself. If you keep moving forward, don't listen to the naysayers, and keep it organized, you will eventually finish your project. And it is so worth it, because as cool as it is to design and build your own vehicle, there's nothing quite like getting in it, turning the key, and driving it. That will turn you into a 5-year-old kid again.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Gary DeLoach from Elizabethton, Tennessee, and his journey started a few years ago when his 16-year-old son Garrett said he wanted to build a street and strip car to go drag racing with. Now Gary thought, that's a pretty good idea, so he's not thrashing the family van there. So he went out and they were able to find this. Now, this is the 1988 Camaro. It was sitting without an engine and transmission, and his son Garrett bought it with some money that he had saved. Now, Gary wasn't too gung-ho about an 88 Camaro, not the toughest car out there, but he said, you know, we'll go with this. And he also knew that he had a 350 Chevy and a 400 turbo tranny laying around in the shop, which he donated to the cause. Now, to help support the engine rebuild, Garrett got a job in a machine shop, and here's a picture of him putting the engine together. Now, the rest of the car, that was pretty rough too. They said it required a new rear end, it required some welding and fabrication to make it right. And this is where Gary said he was able to help his son. And he says he wouldn't trade a single minute of working in the shop with his son. And I tell you, there is nothing like a father-daughter or a father-son project. You learn a lot more than just about working on cars. Now, once it's all together, the plan is to just leave it unpainted, go out and start hitting the local drag strips. Man, if you think you had fun building it, guys, wait till you start racing it. Now, to recognize such a cool project, we hooked up with our buddies at Woodward Fab. We're going to give you one of these big bench vices, because everybody needs a big orange bench vise just to pound on if you've had a frustrating day. Also, we're going to give you one of our project planning books so you can document everything you've done on that car. Very important, especially if you got a race car. Also, we're going to give you one of our Sergeant Rock packages to hopefully inspire you, because that truck was a lot rougher than your Camaro when I started with it. And then finally, we're going to give you one of these O'Reilly gift cards to help offset some of the cost of the project. Now, for the rest of you out there, if you've got a cool project, you want to get it featured on the show, you got to go to our website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit it into what you're working on. Now, the website's also the place to find out more information on any products you saw on the show, any Gearz merchandise, and how to join Gearz Nation so you can stream any of our episodes commercial-free. Finally, don't forget to like us on Facebook so you can get some behind-the-scenes footage of our weekly web series, Shifting Gears. All right, that wraps it up for us today. That means it is time for you to get out there and start working on something. I'm going to go drive Sergeant Rock. We'll see you next time.